Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? Today I brought for you all May June 2024 0455 IGCSE paper variant 13. Let's see what this paper has for us today. All right. MCQ number 1. MCQ number 1 says, how can the economic problem be described? Now we all are familiar with the basic economic problem, which talks about unlimited wants and limited resources. So let's look at the options available. It says economic problem can be as insufficient capital to satisfy our wants. B says insufficient income to satisfy all our needs. C as insufficient resources to satisfy our unlimited wants. And D says insufficient wealth to satisfy all our needs. D cannot be the option because economic problem never talks about wealth. A cannot be the option because again it's talking about insufficient capital. B says insufficient income. Economic problem is never about income. It's always about scarce resources and unlimited wants, right? It addresses the problem of scarcity, right? We have finite resources, right? So it has to be insufficient resources to satisfy our unlimited wants. So for 1, it has to be C. Number 2, what could be included in the factor of production? Land. Now, if we go by the definition, what does land means? Yes, land would refer to any natural resources which is used in production, or land can be defined as gifts of nature available for production. So now, keeping the definition in mind, let's look at the options available. A says bread, B says factory building, C says sports arena, and D says wheat. A would be the output, factory building would be what? Capital. C cannot be the answer, so it has to be D. It has to be wheat. So under the definition of land, wheat is going to be the correct option. So for 2, it has to be D, option D. All right, let's look at MCQ number 3. This says a deposit of shale oil is discovered in an area of farming. The following estimates are made for a 10-year period. If the land is used only for farming, it would yield an income after tax of $10 billion. If the land is used for shale oil extraction, it would yield income after tax of $40 billion. The government would receive $5 billion in taxes from farming and $10 billion in taxes from shale oil extraction. What is the opportunity cost of using the land only for farming? Now, for instance, if the government decides that the land is to be used only for farming, so what will be the opportunity cost? Now, by definition, what do we know? That opportunity cost refers to what? The cost of the best alternative foregone due to a particular choice made. So now what is the choice being made over here? That the government is deciding to opt for farming. It would not go for shale oil, right? Now, if it decides to go for farming, let's add up the total revenue it might be earning. Then let's look at if it went for shale oil extraction, the revenue it would have been earning. And how would you then identify the opportunity cost? We will see what it is foregoing by opting for farming. So in this case, let's look at the amounts. If the land was only used for farming, the after-tax income it was getting was what? It's getting $10 billion. So if it decides for farming, it would yield income after tax of $10 billion. And the government would be receiving $5 billion in taxes. So in total, how much amount of revenue is it generating? If it opts for farming, $15 billion, right? However, if it would have opted for shale oil extraction, then the yield income after tax would have been $40 billion, and the government would have been receiving $10 billion in taxes. So overall, it would have been yielding $50 billion of revenue, right? In the case of farming, it is yielding $15 billion. And in the case of shale oil extraction, the total would have been $50 billion. So how much more the government would have been earning, or in totality, how much more the revenues have been generating would be when you would subtract 50 from 15. right? So how much? So this difference is what? This difference is the opportunity cost. This difference is the opportunity cost. This difference is the amount that the government would be foregoing if it's off for farming. So this means $35 billion. So the difference comes out to be $35 billion. So this means option C. I hope this is clear. All right. Let's look at MCQ number 4. MCQ number 4 says, what 3 key questions determine resource allocation? Now, we all know whenever we are referring to resource allocation, there are 3 basic questions which an economy always answers: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. So, it's option A. What to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce, right? That means which combination of goods to be produced, how much of those goods to be produced, of more of capital or less of consumer, how to produce more of capital production or labor production or a combination of both, and for whom to produce, right? All right. Some questions are very easy. All you need to do is keep your definitions and your concepts clear and you are good to go. So less than a minute, maybe even you will be spending on solving those MCQs. All right. MCQ number 5. MCQ number 5 says, in the diagram, X represents the original equilibrium. So this is the original equilibrium point in the labor market for engineers. The vertical axis shows the wage. The horizontal axis shows the quantity of labor. An increase in the skills of engineers result in an increase in productivity. So now what happens is that the engineers have invested in their skills, and as a result, the productivity level has boosted. Now they are saying which point represents the new equilibrium in the labor market for engineers. Now, what happens when the engineers invested and improved their skills, they witnessed a rise in their productivity levels. Now they are saying, as a result, what would be the new equilibrium position? Now, we all know that when there has been an investment in skills, the productivity level boosted. As a result, what would happen? The labor would be more in demand, right? Such labor with high-tech skills would then be more in demand. So there would be a shift in the demand curve. We would remain on the same supply curve, but there would be a shift in the demand curve towards the out. Initially, we were at D1. Now we'll move to D3, and keeping on the same supply curve S1, now we'll move to point B. Hence, now the new equilibrium position would be B. So for 5, it has to be option B. All right. Number 6. Number 6 says, an explosion in an important oil pipeline causes the world price of a barrel of oil to increase from $50 to $100. So initially the price was 50, let's say P. Now the price has risen to $100. That means P1. So this means what? There has been 100% increase in the price, right? So the price has risen by, price increase is by 100%. Before the explosion, the world demand for oil was 100 million barrels per day. The world price elasticity of demand is negative 0.2. What is the global demand for oil barrels per day as the result of the explosion? Now they are asking you, what is the new global demand for oil? So let's put in all the values and then let's derive the quantity demanded, right? So what do we know? Price elasticity of demand is what? Price elasticity of demand is percentage change in quantity demanded upon percentage change in price, right? So what was the value of PED? Was a negative 0.2. Percentage change in quantity demanded, we don't know. I'll put an X over there. In the denominator, percentage change in price. Initially, the price was 50, then it went to 100. So this is a 100% increase in price. In the denominator, I'll put 100. When I'll cross multiply, the answer I would read would be a negative 20. This means what? A negative 20 would means what? That there is a fall in quantity demanded by 20%. There is a fall in quantity demanded by 20%. Initially, what was the demand? Initial quantity demanded was how much? Initial quantity demanded was 100 million barrels, right? 100 million barrels. Now, if there is a fall of 20%, so the 20% fall of 100 million would be what? 80 million barrels. So the new quantity demanded would be 80 million barrels, right? Initially, the quantity demanded was 100 million. Now, since we found that there would be a reduction by 20%, so when you reduce 100 million by 20%, it would give you 80 million barrels. So the new quantity demanded would be 80 million barrels per day. So it has to be B. I hope this is clear. Number 7. What is included in the study of microeconomics? This means out of all these 4 options, there would be 3 options which would all be related to macroeconomics, topics governing the entire economy, the aggregate economy. However, there would be only one option which would be microeconomics. Let's look at the options. A says demand pull inflation, B says diseconomies of scale, C says increasing unemployment, D says the size of the budget deficit. A says demand pull inflation, that's macro. C says increasing unemployment, that's again a macroeconomic topic. D says the size of the budget deficit, again it's macroeconomics. It's only B, diseconomies of scale, which is microeconomics. And so for 7, it has to be B. Easy, right? Number 8. Number 8 talks about the price elasticity of supply of a product is 1.0. This means it's unit elastic, right? Now they say the price of the product is $10 and the quantity supplied is 200 units. If the price of the product increases to $11, how many units will the quantity supplied increase? Again, let's put in all the values in the formula and then let's derive, right? Now they are asking about how many units will the quantity supplied increase. So we know that price elasticity of supply is percentage change in quantity supplied upon percentage change in price, right? So PES, in place of PES, we'll put a 1.0. Percentage change in quantity supplied, we don't know. I'll put an X. In percentage change of price, there would be 10. How 10? Now you'll ask me how there would be a 10% change in price. Initial price was what? Initial price was what? 10. Initial price was 10. Initial price was $10, right? And the new price is what? $11. So the price has risen by what? $1. So the difference is 1 divided by the initial into 100. This is how you're going to get the change in price, right? So this is what? 10%. So this is how I got this value in the denominator. Get it? Now, when you cross multiply, so what should be the percentage change in quantity supplied you are yielding? 10%. So the percentage change in quantity supplied I'm getting is 10%. Now, what are they asking me? They are asked, so this means what? There's a quantity supplied is increasing by 10%, right? So the quantity supplied is now increasing by 10%. Initially, the quantity supplied was how much? 200 units. So now you will increase. They're asking you how many units. So initial was 200 units. And now when I'll increase it by 10%, so how many units is it increasing? It's coming out to be 20 units. A 10% of 200 is what? 20. So now the quantity supplied will increase by how many units? 20 units. They're not asking you for the percentage. They're not asking you the final amount they are not asking you the new amount. They're asking you by how many units will it increase. Reread the question, please, 2 times, right? There's a trick in this question. So it has to be 20 units. You'll calculate 10% of 200 units, right? This will give you 20 units. The increase, by how many units will it increase? So 8 has to be C. I hope this is clear. All right. Number 9. Number 9 says, the government wishes to reduce harmful emissions from road transport. Now, what is the intention of government? To reduce the level of, let's say, pollution, right? Which measure would be effective in helping to achieve this aim? Now, they are saying which measure should the government adopt in order to attain this objective? Which objective? Of reducing harmful emissions from road transport. A says increased expenditure on oil exploration. Now, if the government would be spending more on oil exploration, what do you think? Would it be adding on to the pollution, or would we reducing the level of it? No, it would be adding on to it, because then it would what? It would increase the supply of petrol and diesel, right? So it would not be achieving your aim. So you can strike this option. C says reduce taxation on the production of private vehicles. So now if the government will reduce taxes on production of private vehicles, so in terms it's what it's doing, it's trying to boost the level of supply. So this would what? This would increase the number of vehicles on the road. So instead of reducing the amount of pollution, it would be accentuating it, right? Adding on to it. So that's not the option. D says reducing incentives to purchase electric vehicles. Now, if the government would remove incentives from the production of electric vehicles, it would be directly what? It would be persuading people to go for cars based on petrol, right? Cars that run on petrol. So again, it would not be useful in attaining this objective. So you will chop D off. So it has to be B. When the government introduces a subsidy on public transport, indirectly it is what it's doing. It's curtailing the consumption or the usage of individual cars. It's actually enticing or encouraging people to use more of public transport, right? And it would be switching people from their uh, consumption of their individual cars or the vehicles, the ownership of their vehicles towards public transport. So for 9, it has to be B. Number 10. What function does a central bank provides for an economy? Now, we all are familiar with the roles of the central bank, right? A says it issues banknotes to encourage spending. Yes, exactly. That's the correct answer. Printing of currency notes and minting of coins. That's one of the prime functions of a central bank. So for 10, it has to be A. All the remaining options would refer to commercial banks. It manages the debt of private sector firms. It offers higher interest rate accounts to encourage savings. It provides mortgages to encourage home ownership. These are all functions of commercial banks and not of the central bank. Therefore, we'll chop B, C, D, and A has to be the correct answer. Number 11. Number 11 says a firm changes from producing individual pieces of wooden furniture by hand to a mechanized production process using the division of labor. So now what is the firm doing? The firm initially was dependent upon producing wooden furniture by hand. Now it is using an entirely mechanized production process, automated production process, and plus it's also using division of labor. That means it has uh, introduced specialization for each individual task, right? So now it has divided up its production process, right, into each small task, right? Now they're saying what is the most likely set of outcomes as a result. So now they've given you 3 parts, and we have to satisfy all the 3 parts of the each options, right? So now, first tell me, without looking at the options, first tell me, if any labor was initially producing something by hand, and now that the labor is no longer producing that product by hand, now the production is entirely automated. So does that increases workers' motivation or reduces worker motivation? It decreases worker motivation, right? We all know that once labor produces things by hand, it feels a sense of satisfaction. It derives a sense of pride. And once that production process is automated, we have all learned that that pride goes away, that sense of satisfaction vanishes, and the level of motivation dips, the level of motivation decreases. So looking at the first column, we have to find options which says worker motivation will decrease. So you can chop A and you can chop A only in this case, because B, C, and D all says worker motivation will decrease, right? Now, average total cost. Now, you tell me what about the average total cost. Now, the firm is using division of labor and mechanized production process. So, yes, the average total cost will what? Decrease. So, again, options which says average total cost will increase, you can chop that off, and that comes in B, which says increase, so you can chop B. So now we are left with what? C and D. Now, the last part talks about total cost. Now, you tell me, should total cost increase or should total cost decrease? Yes, total cost has to increase. Why? Because fixed cost is increasing, right? When the firm has entirely changed its production process, it has made its automated production process. So the total cost will increase. Why? Because the fixed cost will be increasing, but the average cost of production will fall. So it has to be what? It has to be option C, which says that total cost will increase, average total cost will decrease, and worker motivation will decrease. So for 11, it has to be C. I hope this is clear. Number 12. Number 12 says, what is the best definition of a trade union? Now, A says a group of countries that negotiates trade agreements. Incorrect. Trade union is what? Trade union is what? Yes, it's a group of workers that represents the entire labor force, right? And they negotiate on what? On their pay. Collective bargaining is the prime aspect, right? B says a group of firms that negotiates removing obstacles to trade. That's incorrect. D says a group of workers that negotiates fixing prices. No, they don't talk about fixing prices. They talk about collective bargaining on pay. So it has to be C, a group of workers that negotiates collectively on pay. So for 12, it has to be C. Number 13. What is most likely to be a disadvantage when operating a small firm? So now they are saying if a firm chooses to remain small, what would be a disadvantage? A says a lack of external economies of scale. B says a lack of external diseconomies of scale. C says a lack of internal economies of scale. And D says a lack of internal diseconomies of scale. Now, you can chop D and B straight away because they all talk about diseconomies of scale. And here we are talking about disadvantage. So they are saying a lack of external diseconomies. So this can obviously be incorrect because that's absurd. Uh, A says a lack of external economies of scale, and C says a lack of internal economies of scale. Yes, when you are operating a small firm, so you are limited in size, and you will find it difficult to expand your level of scale because you are limited in your resources, you are restricted in your capacity to the size of the capital and to the amount of resources you have available, right? So there is a lack of internal economies of scale. This is a disadvantage, right? Because you cannot expand that quickly or uh, respond to changes in consumer demand that spontaneously because you're restricted by your size, right? So it's a lack of internal economies of scale. So for 13, it has to be C. Number 14. Number 14 says a firm increased output from Q1 to Q2 and achieved economies of scale, right? What do you mean economies of scale? Yes, its average total cost would be the lowest, right? How is this shown on the firm's average total cost curve? Now, C and D is incorrect because they are showing you inverted parabolas of average total cost curve, and in both the cases, the costs is here, which is exactly incorrect, and you're going to chop this off. With A and B, let's say they are saying the output rose from Q1 to Q2. So now initially, if the output was Q1 to Q2, we all know economies of scale would be achieved when the average total cost would have been the lowest. So let's look at option A, in which Q1 was the initial output and C1 was the initial cost. And now when the firm rose its output from Q1 to Q2, so you can see this is the point where the average total cost is lowest, hence it identifies economies of scale, satisfies the situation. So for 14, it has to be A. Let's look at number 15. Number 15 says a busy restaurant employs a large number of highly skilled chefs to individually prepare high quality meals. Now, what they've done is they have hired highly skilled chefs, and each chef is excellent at producing a particular meal, right? Specializes at preparing a particular meal. Now they're saying what is an advantage to the restaurant of this type of production. Now they're saying what would be the advantage for the restaurant by using this method of recruitment. A says a highly skilled chef is paid more than an unskilled cook. So we are looking from the aspect of what? A restaurant. So would this be an advantage to the restaurant or not? No, this would not be an advantage. C says it takes time to train a highly skilled chef. Again, that's not an advantage. The quality of a meal varies according to which chef prepares it. This could not be an advantage because if the quality varies, so it could not be benefiting. B says it is easier to prepare a wide variety of meals. Yes, excellent. That's the answer. Why? Because this way it would give enough space for each chef to prepare the meals that it is perfect at, hence enabling the restaurant to prepare a wide variety of meals at the same time, right? Numerous chefs preparing their own particular dishes at which they are experts, hence enabling the restaurant to prepare a wide variety of meals at the same time. So for 15, it has to be B. I hope this is clear.